Monday, News Center Maine is teaming up with the Maine-Monitor to bring you in-depth reporting on stories all around the state. And this week, the Maine-Monitor has teamed up with News of the United States. Here to talk about it is congressional reporter Daniela Diaz, joining us from Washington. She works for News of the U.S., or NOTUS, a national political publication that partners, again, with the Maine-Monitor to provide coverage of the Maine delegation in the U.S. Congress. Daniela, I want to know what you're hearing right now, particularly from the Maine delegation in the U.S. Senate. The shutdown, are they talking about when this could possibly end?
That's the biggest question right now. They have no clue whether Democrats and Republicans can actually figure out terms to end the shutdown, to have a vote that could potentially start funding things again. It's been 5 weeks. It's been nearly a month since the shutdown began. As you noted, September 19th was the last time the House voted. But what you're seeing from independent Senator Angus King of Maine and from Republican Senator Susan Collins is they're both voting for this Republican CR that would essentially continue funding the government through November 21st. It's really interesting to see specifically Mr. King vote for this, considering most Democrats, that's who he caucuses with, have voted against this every single time. It's now been more than a dozen times since it's been taken to a vote to the Senate floor. But he says he thinks it's important that they continue funding the government because a shutdown has given a lot of power to Trump. I'm quoting him and what he's told the press about why he continues voting for this measure. Now, Susan Collins, a completely different story. She's quite her own senator, as we all know. You know this covering Susan Collins. I know this as covering Susan Collins. I've lost count of the number of times she's broken from her party or kind of has done her own thing. So while she's in these negotiations to try to end the shutdown, it's unclear truly when this will end, when these talks that they're saying have started haven't really gone anywhere just yet.
You had done some very interesting reporting, Daniela, about how Speaker of the House Mike Johnson not ready to return yet for some of these discussions, but there are some of his Republican colleagues that say they are ready. Can you help us understand why the Speaker is not ready while some of his colleagues are?
There are a lot of things at play when it comes to trying to keep the House out that Speaker Johnson is figuring out as he takes this day by day. He's been holding daily press conferences on Capitol Hill, and he's telling reporters, I do not want the House in session because I want to put the pressure on the Senate to figure out how to solve this problem. When the House did pass a continuing resolution, a stopgap measure that would fund the government for at its current levels for 7 more weeks at the time. I'm talking about what happened in September. It's been, a long time since, it feels like a century since that happened. And also to know, someone in the Maine delegation voted for that measure on the Democratic side, Jared Golden. He was the only Democrat. He typically tends to be the only Democrat who votes with Republicans on these important measures because he's in a very purple district, a red district. He understands that he needs to do certain things that are different from his party. So he was the only Democrat that voted for this back in September. But there are a lot of other things going on as well. I mean, Speaker Mike Johnson is keeping Republicans out of town, keeping them in their districts. He has told the press that he believes that by keeping them back in their districts, in many ways, they're focused on the work back home. They're able to meet with their constituents in person and explain what's happening in Washington versus being in Washington while this all plays out. But it's really a pressure campaign for the Senate to figure this out. As Speaker Mike Johnson has said, we passed the measure, the Senate has to pass the measure, and then it goes to President Donald Trump's desk. Because the Senate has not dealt with this, it's not our problem. However, if the Senate does anything in the next couple of days, in the next couple of weeks to try to fund the government, whatever that measure might look like, whether it's appropriations bills or another stopgap measure that will temporarily fund the government, it's going to have to probably go back to the House anyway. So that's when we expect that Speaker Mike Johnson will bring back the House.
What do you think as we kind of look ahead to the campaign season of 2026? Senator Susan Collins certainly running. As this shutdown drags on, do you think this is hurting Democrats' credibility more or Republicans' credibility more? And how do you think it impacts the races for whether it be Senate or CD2?
While we're seeing Susan Collins play this major role in what can happen with the government shutdown, she's in these key negotiations to try to end it. She's going to be part of whatever happens in the end. And that could affect how voters see her when she's up at the ballot box, when her reelection hits voters November 2026. So there's a lot on the line, not only for Susan Collins, but also the Democrats who whoever ends up winning the primary in Maine running against her, because Democrats are also making a huge bet here by not funding the government, voting against a quote unquote clean, no partisan measure, stopgap measure that would fund the government for a few weeks. That's what we saw, because in the Senate, you need Democratic votes to pass, to break the filibuster, get 60 votes on anything. So it'll be really, really interesting to see how this will end up. But Democrats are making a huge bet here, too. They think Americans want us to fight for them. Americans want us to fight against President Donald Trump. And we think this will pay off in the November 2026 elections, midterms. So it remains to be seen how this all wraps up. This could go for days. This could go for weeks. This could go for months. That's what some lawmakers have teased to me, that they really don't know when this ends. And even then, we won't know the repercussions for months after that.
Daniela Diaz from News of the United States. We appreciate your time and your partnership with the Maine Monitor to share these stories on our air. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
To read more of Daniela's reporting, you can go to notus.org. You can also find her stories published on the maine-monitor.org.